If you have tried everything else and are still periodically miserable, if you still contend with one problem after another, if you still have not solved the problem of fear and increasing pressure, and if you are really ready to stop suffering, it is time to do yourself a favor. Start now, this minute, to begin your own determination of what God, reality, truth is. One can never be happy nor self-satisfied until he does. One can never be free of trials and tribulations until he does. One can have no permanent sense of health until he does. No one will ever be free of personal fear or insecurity until he makes a determination for himself of just what God is to him. These are the words of William Samuel, writer, lecturer, and metaphysical practitioner. Mr. Samuel has been active in the study and the practice of the spiritual nature of reality and identity since the 1940s. He has written 5 books, produced numerous essays and tapes, and has given lectures for nearly 30 years. Bill Samuel writes and speaks from lived experience, not from speculation. His works, in simple and direct language, reduce the complexity of other spiritual, mystical, and metaphysical writings into language for the average person. Without publicity or promotion, his works have found their way into the hands of followers around the world. The following seminar was videotaped in the pastoral setting of the rolling hills of North Georgia over the weekend of May the 8th and 9th, 1993. Divine oneness, or synchronicity, is the entrainment of which Bill spoke at these sessions. It is important to note that only 12 days before, Bill had had a stroke, leaving him weakened and barely able to speak. It is a testament to his belief in his ideas that he was able to gather the strength to speak before this audience. As you will see, the power of his words and ideas seems to fill him with strength over the course of the weekend. By the last session of the seminar, Bill seems as energized as his audience. Here then, we present to you William Samuel.
We come into the world where we are before we come into the world is a place I'm not prepared to talk about. I can't say a word about it, so I won't try. Then there is a very wonderful occasion that takes place between mother and father, and linear time begins for us. Linear time. 3 dimensions and time. Then we spend 9 months coveted by our mothers. And this is Mother's Day, and I don't look like your mother. I can't get over all of you coming here when it's Mother's Day. Then we make an emergence all by ourselves, we think. We think. But we're aided and abetted. And there are angels attending. And then we have a few happy years. There are the years of the child. It isn't long until we begin to grow disillusioned And Mama isn't like she seemed to be. And Daddy isn't like he seemed to be. We find out that Christmas isn't real. Uncle George tells us that. Then we find out there are an awful lot of things we can't do. Can't go this way, you can't go that way. Don't pick that up, don't touch that. And the glory and joy of childhood begins to go away. Please don't hang on all these words real heavy, because you know it isn't in the words. You didn't come into this world talking words. And some of you won't go out talking them either. Ask me, I can tell you all about that. It isn't in the words at all. It isn't in the intellectual message at all. We think it is. It isn't in our going to church. It isn't in our belonging to a metaphysical group. It isn't in our much study. It's between the lines. It's under the lines. It's instead of the lines. So all of you remember that it's not going to be in these words. It's in between them. I would like to use a word that I couldn't say 2 days ago, but it's called entrainment. Entrainment. Years ago, most of you would have come here on a train. Even from California, Oregon. Entrainment. It means that everybody is on board. Entrainment is one of those simple words that our great physicists don't know what it means or how it works. Bruce, if you were to start a big pendulum swinging in the back of the room, and Rachel, you started one here, and somebody started one over on the other side of the room, it wouldn't be long until all of those pendulums are swinging together. We don't know why that is. Entrainment. Well, nothing takes place at these talks until entrainment began, until we all relax a little and sit easy and let the entrainment begin. Once upon a time, there was a man whose name was Wing, Li Wei Wing. He played the flute. He gave long concerts. He didn't give a concert very often because those concerts lasted 7 days. 7 days and 7 nights. Very long. But when Wing gave his concert, the birds stopped. to listen. And the wind stopped blowing so it could listen. And even the rocks listened. People came for miles around to hear Wing give his concert. Well, on Wing's last concert, he forgot where he was on the seventh day. He made a mistake, and he flubbed up a little bit, and he played the last lines 2 or 3 times. He just forgot. But then he concluded his concert, and the birds started flying again. The wind started blowing again. And the grass that hurt him started swaying again. And all the people that had come to the concert got up and started home. And what do you suppose they talked about? What did the people talk about? They talked about his mistake. So you people, please forgive my mistakes. Somewhere I wrote a long time ago in a book, we do not have to determine what is to be seen or how it's to be seen, because awareness has no responsibility in the matter and doesn't have to go anywhere to see certain sights or hear certain sounds or feel certain feelings. Isness is completely self-sustaining, effortlessly caring for this awareness we are. Now, this much is certain. The awareness listening to these words will never stop, will never die, but will continue holding the glories of infinite being forever, plumbing the depths from God to joy, from laughter to laughter, from flower to flower, from little boy to little boy and little girl to little girl, from evening star to morning star. There is no death of identity, no end of the awareness that God is being. That awareness is this awareness. And that's how I would like to start. There is one thing that no one in this whole world will quarrel about. We quarrel about everything else, whether the Bosnians are doing what they're supposed to do or the Serbians are doing as they should, or whether we have dressed properly or not, whether we should have come or not. But there is one thing about which we are absolutely certain. And I call that to everyone's attention to begin with, because this is a beginning. The one thing that we don't fuss about is that awareness is aware. Awareness is aware. What is awareness? Well, at the moment, you look forward and you look at a creature up here at a table, pretty table, with real flowers on it. And you say his name is Bill. But I want you to be more basic than that. You began with awareness, didn't you? You were waking this morning and you looked around and you said, oh, what am I doing in Georgia? Or, why am I here? You began with awareness. The very first thing that was aware was awareness. We began with awareness. One time the apostles went to Jesus and they said, tell us how our end will be. And he looked at them and he said, you're talking about your ending, so I assume you have found your beginning. I'm paraphrasing liberally. That's about all I can do now. And blessed is a man who has found his beginning and stays there. So we really, all of us, start with awareness. This awareness is aware right here, right now. And we never leave it. We never leave it. We never go away from it. Awareness itself is who and what we are. There are those who began to wonder, well, what's life all about? Why am I here? Well, what's awareness all about? Awareness is always awareing. It's always aware. Even when we have been ill to the point of being unable to move, awareness goes right on being aware. And awareness isn't ill. Awareness isn't having a hard time. Awareness might not like what awareness sees and hears, but awareness is going right on, being aware. And being perfectly aware. Three years ago, I had a heart attack. It wasn't my first one. I've had a lot of them, and if you will excuse me, I will tell this story because it will help you maybe. And it was a monster heart attack. And they can come at any minute. And I was given an angioplasty because they said that will help. And I said, well, you're the expert, so have at it. And there was an angioplasty, and it went well. And everything was going fine. And then all of a sudden, it collapsed. And I was all by myself. And then all of them bypasses collapsed, one by one. There were 5 of them, and they all collapsed. And I wasn't supposed to live. Now, during this time, I am hyper-aware. I am aware of everything. I am aware of anything and everything I want to be aware of. I can be aware of my childhood, of my father and my mother. I could be aware of anything. And yet I'm hearing these voices talking about this is bad, this is bad, this is fatal, there's not enough blood vessel left to carry blood around this man's heart, and so forth and so on. But I could hear everything. And I survived. And I survived because somewhere along the line, I said, well, okay, this is what it's like. I suppose did I. But awareness belongs to God. And awareness is God's awareness. Doesn't belong to me. Doesn't belong to Billy or Bill. It belongs to God. And so God take care of it. God took care of it. Somehow I survived. And somehow the body created what was necessary for a heart to survive. It was nip and tuck for a while. And there was a wonderful lady that was present. And I remember her coming into the room and tending those chores that nobody else wanted to. And one day she bent down real close to my ear so I could hear her. And I'm going to say it like she said it, because the way she said it could be improved. She said to me, "Does you know what love is? Does you know what love is?" Well, those of you who have read my books, several of them, know that every book contains a chapter about love. And this lady asked me, do I know what love is? And I wanted to hug her neck. And for the first time in my life, I guess, for the first time in my whole life, I was totally, fully, absolutely honest. Because I said to her, I don't know what love is. I haven't the least idea what love is. I wish I knew what love is. But I don't know what love is. And this lady says to me, you doesn't have to know what love is. Because God loves you. And I love you. And from that moment, I got better. From that moment, I made a turnaround. And I lived instead of dying. And as the months went by, I said, there must be a reason for this. There has to be a reason for this. Surely no man has been granted a boon to keep living like this. And somebody knocked at my front door, and it was a visitor, and I said, come in. You're here for a reason. I know you're here for a reason because you knocked at my door. And somehow we both arose to the occasion. And then there was another knock, and then another, and another. And I decided that there had to be a reason. The reason we're living, the reason we're here, what it's all about, it seemed I knew. And it seemed silly not to tell anybody anymore. For many years, I didn't talk about the child because I didn't want people to think I was childish. And I wouldn't talk about the child. And I wouldn't talk about the equation because I was afraid to talk about the equation. I was raised a little Jewish boy, and I was told that there were secrets, and one didn't betray the secrets. One didn't talk about God because one didn't know anything about the ineffable. And I had to, when I thought about back over long life. I remember Buddha wouldn't talk about God either. He said, I don't know anything about God, so I won't talk about God. But you can ask me other questions. And if you remember, the old rabbis of old wouldn't even write the word God. They would leave it blank. And so it was that I thought that I shouldn't talk about the equation, and I shouldn't talk about the child. And of course, I can't talk about God. I was raised a little Jewish boy, but my mother was a Christian Zionist. I couldn't go to temple because they said his mother is a Christian Zionist and doesn't believe in medicine and doesn't go to doctors. And I didn't belong to the Christian community because they said he's a Christian Zionist. And I remember my first time to go to school, my first day at school. I was greeted by a hailstone of rocks. People throwing rocks at me, yelling, Jew, go home. Jew, go home. So I know what it's like to grow up without a community at all, without a Christian community or a Jewish one. Now, when I was 7 years old, I was attending church. I guess I was 8 years old. When all of a sudden a man had an epileptic seizure and screamed bloody murder. And he fell out of his seat screaming. Now that sort of thing doesn't happen at a Christian Science church. You don't dare do that because God is all. Because God is good. And there isn't any life, truth, intelligence, or substance in matter. But the man fell out of the seat anyway, and he screamed anyway, and nobody did anything. I was way over on one side of the church up front because Mom believed in sitting up front. Let the visitors sit in the back. And this man screamed, and I knew that you weren't supposed to interrupt such a holy thing as readers reading from the Bible and the science of health with key to the scriptures. You want me to say it, don't you? By Mary Baker Eddy. But he kept screaming, and nobody did anything. And I broke away from my mother, and I ran all the way across the front of the church and down the aisle to where this tall, big, huge man was screaming. And I just knew that he shouldn't be there and that somebody should be helping him. And I started tugging toward the vestibule. I looked up and saw that everybody was knowing the truth. Everybody was pinching their nose and knowing the truth. Well, I started dragging him down the aisle. It was to have a beautiful carpet like this. It was this, wood floor. and there were wooden pews. And a little elderly lady stood up and she helped me. So it was she and I dragging the man to the rear of the church. In the vestibule, a doctor who was in attendance, who had never been allowed to join the church because he was a medical doctor, came to the man's rescue and told me, "Billy, you can go outside if you like. You shouldn't be in here now." And I went outside and I sat in the privet hedge and I said to myself, if God is all, if God is everywhere and everything, and if God is good, in which there is nothing worketh or maketh alive. I was a smart little 8-year-old. Then, why is this man screaming? And why doesn't somebody help him? And I was resolved at 8 years old to find out why life is what life is. and how it's like it is. And so that was how it began. Then I was sent to a military school. I complained about having too many sisters and not enough brothers. And I was sent to a military school in Mississippi. And they used a hazing system. And I can't tell you how many brooms have been broken over my 14-year-old butt. And how many paddles have been whacked against my 14-year-old butt. And coat hangers wrapped around it. But I was still determined to know if God is good, why is all this going on? I made a discovery at that military school, and that was if I pretended to be studying, they wouldn't haze me. So I pretended to study like crazy my whole first year until I wasn't a plebe anymore. I no sooner got out of military school than I went to China, second lieutenant of infantry. I was much too young to be a second lieutenant of infantry. I was only 18 years old. The Army didn't know what to do with it. So I went to the backwoods of China, flew the hump, and there I had as an interpreter a most wonderful man. He was a Taoist master. I didn't know what a master was. Had no idea what a Taoist master was. But everywhere we went, people would recognize this man. And they would bow in front of him. Children would come up to him and laugh. Just laugh. And hold his hand and laugh. And I said to myself, boy, I've got a good interpreter. And I'm going to learn about China, and I'm going to learn what makes this man behave like he does. Now, he was fat, and I wanted him to get in shape like a good second lieutenant wants his soldiers to get in shape. I was going to have to live with Chinese troops out in the field with Chinese troops, not Americans. I had to eat Chinese food. I had to eat with chopsticks. And my only luxury was Mr. Shore, who spoke English beautifully and spoke Chinese well. Now, I found out about Mr. Shore. I found out that just 2 months before he joined me, his wife had been killed by the Japanese. His wife had been raped to death by the Japanese, and his daughter too. Now, Mr. Shore was a Taoist master withdrawn from the organization to preclude that question. He was withdrawn and had married. So I went to his tent one day when he was supposed to be exercising, and he was doing Tai Chi. Have you ever seen Tai Chi? It's the most unexercising exercise that ever was. It is not designed to take fat off your tummy and to put muscles. It's designed to coordinate the eye with ear, with the thoughts, with the sounds, with the sky. And he was doing his Tai Chi when I went in. And I said, Mr. Shore, why are you such a happy man? He said, I'm supposed to be. Why should I be? Then I told him I knew about his wife and his daughter. And I said, we Americans don't appreciate that. We think that you should be more respectful of your wife and your daughter. And that you should have a long and mournful face. And he said, well, I understand you are a Christian Scientist. Now, how did he know that? This is the backwoods of China. This is Yunnan province, barely over the hump from India. How did he know I was a Christian Scientist? He said, you don't believe in death, do you? And I said, no. I'm told that we don't believe in death. I don't know why. Because people die regularly. especially Christian Scientists. He said to me, continued his Tai Chi. While he continued his Tai Chi, he said to me, I don't believe in death either. And I'm living that truth. There is a gentleman here in attendance, probably the senior in attendance. I can't read the name, but his name is Joseph Dowler. Joe, are you here? Hi, Joe. God, it's good to see you. Joe, Ruby is here too. Ruby is right here, right now. Ruby is closer than she's ever been. And that's a fact, isn't it? Death is not what it looks like, and neither is life. And neither is this three-dimensional space-time continuum what it appears to be. I said to myself, and Mr. Shieh said, I am living my philosophy, why don't you? Then I said, boy, have I got a great interpreter. And I'm going to stick real close to him. And I did. During the almost 3 years that followed, Mr. Shieh and I were close together. I saved his life. He saved my life. Later on, when he had the chance to not be in combat, he chose to come with me anyway, to be in combat. I want to tell you how the party, I've never told this, have I? I want to tell you, I say it all with Mr. Shieh because I wanted to know what he knew. And he taught me a lot. One day when the Japanese were coming up a valley and it appeared we would be captured. I told Mr. Shieh to please go ahead because he couldn't hide wearing civilian clothes. But there was no way I could hide. And he wouldn't. He was retching. He was throwing up. He was vomiting. There is no sick than when you're vomiting. We had just climbed a hill. And I was telling him, please come on. Oh man, please come on. You've got to go. You've got to get up and go. And he was on his hands and knees and he was retching. And he pointed to the mountains. And I said, I see the damn mountains. We have to climb it, so come on. He said, no, look. And he kept pointing. I got down on my hands and knees and I looked up his arm. He was pointing to a little flower that blooms in the snow of the mountains. Sandy, you must know what that flower looks like. Sandy, you and Earl and Tommy. You live up in the mountains, Colorado. He pointed to the flower. He said, do you see that little blue flower? Just when the sun hits that area, it blooms. And tonight it won't be blooming. And it's exceedingly good fortune. Exceedingly good fortune. I said, we got to go. Somehow we got out of there. On another occasion, we were riding our mules into a little town, and off in the distance we saw what we thought were children running around a tree, catching the leaves. And by this time, I was good at teasing Mr. Shieh. Yeah, you crazy people, look at you, out catching leaves. It's the only tree in the country, and you're out there catching the leaves. As we got closer, I noticed it weren't old men. I mean, they weren't children. They were old men. And they were so happy. And they were running under the tree. Every time the wind would blow loose a leaf, they would run to catch it. And it's hard to catch a falling leaf. But exceedingly good luck. It's exceedingly good fortune to catch a yellow leaf. Not so long ago, a man from Minnesota came to visit me. He was so serious and so earnest, and he had such a long face. And the leaves were falling out of the persimmon tree. And I was walking down the hill. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't keep myself from it. I ran over there. I started catching the leaves, trying to. And do you know what? Old Sourpuss got right up. And he came right out there. And he and I were catching leaves. You've never heard such laughter? Such laughter. When my time in China was over, I went back to study with old Mr. Shieh. He greeted me at the train station. He gave me a mantra. And then he said, "Tell me what this means." The same moon shines on 10,000 rivers. Well, I was like Tom Feltonstein. I knew the answer right away. And I started to give him an answer. After all, I had known him almost 2 years. But this was to say with him. He said, "You don't have to answer that question now. You have 3 days. 3 days and 3 nights to answer that question." So I went back to my little place, and I started writing the answers. The same moon shines on 10,000 rivers. And it meant this under certain circumstances. It meant that. Then I would lie down on my blanket, which was on the floor, and I would think of another reason, another answer. I would get up and write that. It wasn't long until I had several pages filled with answers. The same moon shines on 10,000 rivers. When I went to see Mr. Shieh, I must have given him the right answer because he kept me for a suit to study under the Taoist tradition, which is very hard. You only see the master once every 30 days. Only once in 30 days, well, 28 days, a moon. He gave me a discipline to do. That discipline was to walk down and go into this village and to see good in everybody, no matter what they looked like, no matter what they said, did, but to keep looking at them till I could see some good. I still do that. It's the funnest discipline that ever was. All of you, try it. Keep going until you can see something good about that one. Now, sometimes it's negative. It was real easy for me to see a pretty lady and see something good. It's so easy to see an old man. On my last day in China with Mr. Shieh, he didn't come the way he was supposed to. He was supposed to come right down and greet me with the Chinese greeting. And I get the Chinese. He didn't come. And he didn't come. And he didn't come. Finally, late in the day, I sent the little Chinese soldier that was there to ask for Mr. Shieh to please come. I only got to see him once in 28 days. He was the only one in that part of the world that could speak English. Well, finally he showed up. He was wearing slippers. He looked very angry. He looked at me and he said, "You fool." I didn't know what he meant. I had done everything I was supposed to do. He looked at me and second time, he said, "You fool." And then he spun around and he left. And that was the last time I saw Mr. Shieh. Never ever saw him again. Some months later, I'm home, and there's a letter for me. And my dad, with great anticipation, said, "There's a letter from China for you." In those days, it was very rare to get letters from so far away. And I recognized the date on the letter. And it was the date of the incident. I called that the incident. The day he called me a fool. I opened the letter and I read it. And it said approximately, "Dear Bill, I will this day call your attention to the most difficult thing I've ever done. This day, I'm going to tell you all that stands between you and self-fulfillment, between you and peace, between you and joy, between you and victory. All that stands between you and it." The letter went on. "This day I'm going to do the most difficult thing I've ever done. I'm going to show you how 2 words, they're just sounds. Word can't hurt you, you know. Just a sound. I'm going to show you how 2 words will step between a friendship of many years." I had to stop and think what the 2 words were. He had called me a fool. "You fool," and walked out. Mr. Shieh passed on a few months later. But he is aliver now than he ever was. Mr. Shieh called me a master. And he said, "But when I do, I want you to know what a master is. Never abuse it. Can't teach it, but never abuse it. What a master is one who recognizes God. Who can say, this is it. This is it. This is it. That's all a master is. Before our session is over with, I hope I can call everyone's attention to all that stands between you and joy, between you and the answer to every question, between you and wealth, between you and sufficiency. I hope I can do that in the hours ahead. And I thank you very much. We'll take a break. Tinkle. Thank you. I am going to talk standing up. I am going to rise to this occasion. If I thought I had to do anything, I would be lost. It isn't me who does anything. And none of us do anything. I promised that this would be a seminar, and it will be, which means that you will participate as much as I do. I didn't know I would talk so slowly. The fact is, I didn't know I could talk at all. A couple of days ago, that was so. Now, I want to talk to you about a present that is here right now. We all started saying that the indisputable fact of being is awareness. We awaken in the morning and look around and say, well, how do I feel today? And here I am at the same old grind. And awareness is aware. How do I feel? That's, of course, awareness giving its reports. But I want to tell you that awareness, while it is here functioning, I'm going to try letting go of everything and walk around just a little bit. There is a presence right now. You can call that presence whatever you like. I used to say God. I like to use that word, God. But I have been made aware during the past 40 years that there are some sections of the country that you go to, you don't talk about God. You don't use a word, and so forth. So if you are comfortable with spirit or truth or isness, use any word you like. But I want to refer at the moment to that present that is here, that we all forget about, a presence. Now, you know what? I don't have any adding machine up here, but if I had adding machines going, and you all had adding machines out there, we would all be aware that there was a presence of arithmetic in the room. And that presence doesn't announce itself, doesn't show itself forth, doesn't say, here I am, doesn't look down on us with castigating eyes. But it's here. That presence is here. Arithmetic is here. Now, you musicians, there are a lot of musicians in this group. There's one lady who sings so beautifully and so well. She's like wings. She makes everybody cry when she sings. There are musicians here, but we know that the principle of music is here, right now. It's fully here. It's totally here. It's not partially here. It's not just a little bit here. It's completely here. Arithmetic and music. Those of you who write know that the alphabet is here too. Writing has been my discipline to find out about the present, about it, about awareness. So the alphabet is here, right now. It isn't flying through the room, calling attention to itself. I'm afraid I'm going to sit down. So I want to tell you that right here, right now, is a presence, fully here. I call it God. It's always here.